MMA Now, powered by Film On TV Networks.
I'm David Cannon with Film On TV Networks, MMA Now, sponsored by Gustoso Aguardiente Artisanal Rum. Live life with passion, live life with Gustoso. And right now I'm joined with MMA correspondent Brian Shepard and UFC middleweight King Kevin Casey.
Thanks for having me on the show, man.
How you doing, Kevin?
Good, man. Good, excellent.
You know, I have a bone to pick with you, even though I don't have a lot of bones to pick with a lot
Let's
of
get right to it, right?
a lot of fighters. I'll never live down missing the marriage from you to Muhammad Ali's daughter. Can you just go on camera and talk about why I didn't get that one slot?
You know what? It was kind of a last minute notice that you told me that you wanted to go, and unfortunately, like the seating was very tight. I wasn't hands on with all of the seating, so I didn't want to have you show up and not have you have a meal in a proper place to sit, because I hold you in high regard. So it was only out of not having the proper setup for your arrival that it went down like that.
Maybe one day I can come over for dinner, for lunch, a coffee, espresso.
100%. It would be an honor to have you over.
Well, I'll hold you to that. Let's get right into it. Let's talk about this weekend's past fights. Mark Hunt, Frank Mir, the walk-off KO. What did you think about it?
I mean, anytime you get those heavyweights in there, man, it's an explosive deal. You can't be shocked that Mark Hunt had a knockout in that fashion, but to get it against Mir, it definitely was a statement, and it was something that was exciting. So, my hats off to both of those guys for putting it out there. And the guy has cannons for hands. You know what I mean? So
Did you think Mir was doing himself any favors by coming in just as heavy as Hunt? It seemed like he would have done better on the ground if he got in trouble with a stand-up. Did you think he would have been better served coming in a little lighter, where he could have been a little quicker?
Well, to be honest, man, the fight starts on the feet. So there's no way to bypass the striking, and you have to deal with it until you can get the ground going. But it was a short fight, and Hunt set things up well. I think Mir does pretty good at that weight that he's at. When he comes in a little lighter, I think his power suffers a little bit. So I think he just kind of tries to stay relaxed as possible, not put too much stress on his body, and just go in there and just feel good.
At 42 years old, do you think Mark Hunt can still be a heavyweight contender? I mean, he's a contender, but do you think he can get this strap?
I mean, anything's possible. Against any opponent, he has the ability to go out there and put on a performance like we saw, so you can't count him out. Anytime you get a guy who's that explosive, you can put him in there and he can rise. At the same time, he has the experience on his side. He's been doing this forever. So, look at Verdum. I believe Verdum's close to 40 or around that, and he's the champion. So at this point, we could be looking at a guy who's just really getting into a whole nother rhythm, and anything can happen out there.
Yeah, I think especially with him coming into MMA a little later than in his career than a lot of other fighters, he's kind of hitting his stride, seems to be right now.
Yeah, but he has a lifetime of experience, and he has that power. You can never count that out.
But think back, if it was 10 years ago, would that be a scary Mark Hunt? And if he knew what he knew right now?
I mean, I wouldn't want to get into the cage with him now. So if we're talking about scary, he's still imposing that today. So.
The co-main event, we saw Neil Magny and Hector Lombard get it on. Lombard was actually started at your weight class, middleweight, went down to 170. What did you think about the co-main?
I thought it was a great fight, and Lombard coming off a long layoff probably didn't have his timing. And so I think that definitely plays into it. He always starts off fast and kind of, dies out a little bit later in the fight. But so that probably, Magny is a guy who stays in shape year round. He's always going to come in shape. And so if you don't have that time, and if you're not sharp with that rhythm, you could become a victim.
Do you think jiu-jitsu played a part in it? And should the ref have stopped the fight at the end of the second round? I didn't count, but it seemed like 100 strikes.
Yeah, in my opinion, I don't feel there's any reason for a fighter to take that much damage. It just seemed a little excessive. He was protecting himself, but he wasn't showing any hope of really getting out of the situation. And so I feel like the fight should have been stopped. But then again, that Hector Lombard is a tough, durable fighter. And, you know, a lot of guys are going to have a hard time if you stop their fight prematurely, myself being one of them. You know, you never want to count yourself out. We've seen guys, you know, take all this damage. You know, Frankie Edgar, you know, in tough fights, take a lot of damage and turn it around. So, you know, nobody really wants to have their fight stop premature.
Well, I think that goes. The second round went hand in hand with the first round.
Yes.
So the ref gave him plenty of chances to
Yeah.
you know, in the first. So it's almost fitting that he gave Lombard the chances in the second.
Yeah.
So
Now, before we get into you, let's talk about a couple more things. You are a Gracie fighter, is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor, this is still blowing up. It made highest pay-per-view in UFC history. What did you think going into the fight from a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter background of Nate versus Conor?
I knew definitely that Nate would have a huge advantage on the ground, and I knew that if Nate got him on the ground, he would slice right through him. So, you know, I was a little concerned about his conditioning, not knowing, you know, what point in training he was at. You know, I know those guys, they train hard up there, and they do stuff that no other athlete out there does. So I knew if anybody could do it on that short of notice, I knew Nate was going to pull it out.
The Diaz brothers, have you trained with them before?
Yes, I've trained with them before.
And in what capacity and how was it?
I believe it was I helped out when Jake Shields was fighting Dan Henderson, so I went up to the Bay and trained with those guys, and I mean it was phenomenal, the amount of tough guys that they had there. Of course, I didn't try to do a triathlon with those guys because I know better than that, but I mean the training was great, the intensity and just the hunger in the gym. So they have a good group of guys out there that are technical, guys that are hungry. You know, no one was complaining, and it just was a great environment to put yourself in. You know, unfortunately, I'm not able to travel up there as much as I would like to, but I'm always a supporter of the whole Scrap Pack crew and everybody. You know, shout out to all the Cesar Gracie and all the Gracie fighters out there.
So if the rumors are true, if they're going to redo this fight at 200, what do you see happening? Like, if it goes to welterweight or if it comes back down to lightweight?
Well, number one, if you give Nate Diaz a full training camp, it's gonna be ugly for McGregor, and I think McGregor knows that, and I think the UFC sees that as another opportunity to really play on that big exposure that fight got, and just to have another big event.
We know you're doing us a favor by coming in and talking tonight, training for your next fight. Can you give us some ideas about what's in store for the next one you have coming up?
Yes, I recently signed to fight on UFC 199, and I'm facing Elvis Mutacic. I believe he's a guy who was a champion of MCC or MFC organization, and he has one UFC fight. So, I mean, this is going to be at middleweight. He's a tough opponent. I have a lot of respect for him, but I'm going to be on my home turf, and I lost my last fight, so I'm really hungry to go out there and make a statement on this one. So I'm excited, man, and I've been training hard, and yeah, you're going to see an exciting fight.
How is your eye? I mean, you lost your last fight by TKO, but the fight before, you had got it poked in your eye and you needed some type of surgery. Did that have any effect on your last fight?
I can't say that injury affected me in the last fight, but I had a very long training camp for the first fight, and then I had an additional month at it. So I had a 4-month training camp. I fought with some injuries, and I wasn't at my best, and I also fought a top 15 opponent, so it wasn't my greatest performance, but everything has changed, and now I have a new camp. I've had some time to relax a little bit and just come in rejuvenated.
Now, as far as 199, you're going to be fighting in your backyard.
Yes,
the
sir.
Forum. Does that add more pressure to you?
Definitely not. I won't have to fly to get to the event. I'll be able to sleep in my own bed and just be in a nice, relaxed environment and just have the support and the energy of all of my people around me. So I rise to the challenge, and I stand up when I'm at home. You're not gonna come to my house and go inside my fridge. You know what I'm saying? So that's it. That's how it goes.
Well, speaking of fridge, so what's in your fridge? Like, what kind of rituals do you go through when you're entering into your actual training camp before a fight? Do you change your diet, that sort of thing?
Well, previously I would just kind of do my own diet and just try to eat as healthy as possible. But I actually have a dietitian for this fight to really kind of just tighten up on everything and make sure that my weight cut goes well. My last weight cut I came in a little bit too heavy, and I felt like it slowed me down and affected my performance. So this will be the first time in my career that I actually have a dietitian, and I'm measuring out my food and just putting the science behind that aspect of training.
Okay, are you feeling a difference starting off with that now and then going through training?
100%. I feel like I have a lot more energy. I feel that my strength is improved, and I just want to carry a lot less body fat.
So there's been a lot of talk recently with fighters moving to Bellator or going and fighting outside the UFC. Do you see there being a growing trend with free agency, kind of, for lack of a better term, coming out in fighters today? Rory's got the one fight with Wonder Boy next, and then he's going to be redoing his contract. What do you see as kind of do you see this as kind of a changing of the guard when it comes to contracts and fighters today?
You know, I think that that there's a little bit more of a healthy competition out there, but at the same time, you know, this is where all the premier athletes want to be, in the UFC. So some of these guys who I think are going into the later parts of their career and already have solidified themselves as marquee players are going to look for the biggest paycheck at the end of the day. You know, and a guy like myself who's still coming up and trying to really establish himself in the UFC, this is where I want to be. You know, I think that we get a little bit more exposure in the UFC. And, you know, of course, we're all not happy with the way that some of the things have gone down with possibly, you know, a Reebok deal, a guy like myself coming in, you know, less than five fights in the UFC. So it's good to see that there's competition going on out there, but at the same time, right now, the UFC is where I want to be, and I think that all the up and comers and the guys who are trying to establish themselves want to be there as well.
Now, I know you got to get out of here. You got to go do some training, so I'm going to go through some quick questions, firing them off. Now, if you don't want to answer them, you can say tap out.
Tap out? Oh, so you're gonna try to break me out here, huh?
So you can say tap out, which is it's quite all right. Okay, Michael Bisping tapped out on a couple questions, so there's no shame in it.
No doubt.
Superman versus Batman, who's better, and who wins?
Superman, all day, every day.
Who's the one fighter in the UFC that you can't stand, that you really don't like?
I really don't have any. Everybody's out there, and everybody had to grind to get to where they're at. So I have respect for everybody.
Tap out. One person that you like a lot in the UFC. Your favorite person.
I can't say that I have a favorite. You know, I respect. I just have a deep admiration and respect for everybody who knows the real grind out there.
Now, if you could go back and tell a young Kevin Casey, give him some advice, what would one piece of advice would be for a young Kevin Casey that's in his elementary to high school days?
Just as someone aspiring to be a professional athlete, understand that you have to train year round. You know, you can't just take time off and when an event comes up, try to get going. You have to treat this as a year-round sport, as a lifestyle.
Who's a better cook, you or your wife?
Definitely my wife. You trying to get me murdered out here?
Last question. You're married to Ali's daughter. Who has the better hands, you or the missus?
You know what? I think in live action, I will be better. I'll do a little better. But on the speed bag, she's vicious. So if you ever saw her on the speed bag, you would be impressed. So I give it to her in the speed bag area.
All right, just give me one last thing. One prediction. John Jones versus Daniel Cormier. Who wins this fight and why?
I like Cormier. You know, I think that the first fight, Cormier fought a little bit emotional. And, you know, the fight was built up. And Jones is also coming off a big layoff and has a lot of mental demons that he has to conquer in this fight. So the pressure's on Jones, you know, and Cormier is going to fight a lot more, he's going to fight a lot more strategic than he fought the last time. So I really think that Cormier will pull it out this time.
Kevin Casey, you made it off the hot seat. Enjoy your time. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.